Content warning. This video is not made for kids. It contains fictional depictions of mental illness, fictional violence, and fictional abuse. The fictional characters in this story are heavily afflicted by the things that I have spelled out to you, and some of the inner monologue seems to suggest that they should be getting hurt like this, but that is absolutely not the case. Me portraying this ABUSE, or mental illness, is meant to show the audience how the illness, or ABUSE, feels inside of the mind of the afflicted person, so they can sympathize and maybe stop themselves from following a similar pattern in the future. Be careful if you are easily triggered. You're most likely about to enter the mind of someone who is heavily afflicted by illness and ABUSE. Viewer discretion is advised. No light could reach where Moon was perched. A cold platform supported him, the jagged, twisted remains of a broken railing standing on either side of him. His legs dangled over the edge, the vast emptiness of the void nipping at his toes like icy floodwater. Scrapes and scratches echoed through the rocky cavern, the scrap dump excited at his presence, beckoning for him to join them. The black and yellow police tape had been taken down after the investigation, meaning that he had been able to return to this place as many times as he wanted. It hurt to be here, but he couldn't just get up and walk away. He wanted to see her again. He just wanted to see her again. Moon was completely lost in the pitch black of the cave, stuck in an endless cycle of remembrance. Her tiny smile. He missed the way that she smiled when she was little. With other kids, she always kept her head down and her hands folded close, but when she played with the daycare attendants, all of that was gone. She would smile so bright, Moon wondered if Sun could use it to switch, her array of missing baby teeth on full display between rosy cheeks. She could never keep her blonde hair inside of her pigtails, straw-like strands of it getting in her face while she ate. She just couldn't stop giggling while playing hide-and-seek. He would always know exactly where she was because of all of her fits of smothered laughter, each bout of it making it even harder for him to pretend that he hadn't heard her. In the general fashion of monkey see, monkey do, she always insisted on staying after the daycare was closed to help Sun clean up. Sun tried to give her smaller tasks like picking up the toys, but she would continuously try to prove that she was big enough for the mop now. She always looked upon him and Sun with such wonder in her sparkling green eyes, like the animatronics were some magical creatures like unicorns or fairies. So many times she had forced him to sit still and pose for her while she drew him, each attempt more determined to capture his image than the last. The end products were lumpy and disjointed as all child drawings were, but Sun and Moon loved every single one of them, encouraging her that she was getting even better. Some days, her father would have to physically drag her out of the daycare's double doors to take her back home, with her wailing and screaming the entire way. It never seemed to register to her that she could just see him tomorrow, her attempts to stay overnight ranging from hiding in the play structures to latching onto Moon's leg and refusing to let go no matter how hard anybody pulled. Fanny's time going through elementary school, middle school, high school, college, celebrating her 21st birthday, growing up, her whole life, it continued to replay itself in his head, stopping at random points to taunt him, jingling the memory just out of reach like a cruel man shaking a fresh chicken bone above a starving dog. It was over. All of it was over before he even realized that it had been coming to an end. And now every single one of those memories were different. Fundamentally, mortifyingly different. If he had known what she was going to grow into. Moon shuddered at the thought, his arms hugging around his middle, the cold of the cavern beginning to seep into the copper of his wires. He just wanted her back. He wanted to go back, to live in those memories again, to just forget any of this ever happened. This couldn't be real. His baby couldn't be gone. It didn't matter that she wasn't really a relative. She was his baby, and nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for what had happened on the 28th. Being here probably didn't help, but he just couldn't stop going over what happened on that night. Every single sensation had been scored deeply into his brain, those etchings now being carefully, surgically examined and picked apart and torn to pieces in his search for answers. The broken safety railings stuck out to him on his left and right side. He wanted to bash them apart, not caring how that would affect the stability of the stairwell he was sitting on. The stupid railing. If the stupid railing hadn't broken. What if he had just run a little faster? When he was chasing her up the stairs, if he had just run a little faster, would that have changed the outcome of the struggle? If he had just stopped being a coward, if he had just used his catchers from the beginning, would he have been able to subdue her and save her? What if he just fought harder, fought smarter, faster? His chest had hurt so bad on that night. He could freshly remember how he thought that he was going to die from the pain. But clearly he wouldn't have died from it. He knew that now. If he knew then that all of this might happen, could he have summoned up the willpower to fight through the pain and save her? Take her down without incident? The heat of her blood on his wires, the image of her face. Oh God, her face. His hands were clamped over his eyes now, his breath catching in his throat. The gashes had been so deep, down to the bone. Her molars, he had been able to see her molars, her scalp flapping off. He wanted to throw up. How could he have done that to her? What was wrong with him? Did he really have to be that violent? What if there was another way? What if he had just done better? What if... In his bad arm... Moon made his right arm squeeze his left, the sore joint flaring up again. He squeezed harder, his entire body shaking, the sound of his jingling bells echoing against the rocky walls. Why did he grab onto her with his bad arm? It had been a split-second decision, just one simple mistake, but it had costed him everything. Why did he make that mistake? Why did he not realize his bad arm would give out? Why was his knee-jerk reaction to use his damaged arm to reach out to her? Did he want it to happen? Was he secretly hoping that his arm would do it for him, knowing that he couldn't bring himself to kill his own child? The questions were crushing him, suffocating him, and he had nothing to answer them with. Just like every other time they came for him. He was so stupid and sloppy and useless that he couldn't even get that one thing right, the one thing that would have saved her. Why didn't he just grab her with his other arm? Why didn't he pull her up? It would have been so easy. She would have still been here. He could have saved her. If he just grabbed her with his other arm, his baby wouldn't be rotting in a mortuary. The thought of what she had looked like after her fall began to push him over the edge. The guilt and shame and frustration surged over him like a pounding, icy waterfall, and he was completely crippled under its torrential weight, sobbing so hard he could hardly find space to breathe. He was so tired of this. So tired of crying. But he just couldn't stop. Perched right at the edge of the platform, Moon hid his head in his hands and wept, shuddering and gasping and wailing like a dying animal. He should have pulled her up. He should have done better. He should have stopped it. He should have done something. He kept jabbing his thumb into the joint where his bad arm was, chasing down the pain. Her tiny, giggling voice, her scream of agony as its hooks lacerated her face. Her huffy whine for him to play a little longer. Her scathing rant right when she thought that she was about to get away with murder. It was so loud, so overwhelming in his head, it felt like he was being impaled by a javelin again and again and again, all over his body, in his chest and his stomach and his arms and legs and face. She was gone. She was really gone. His thoughts repeated that realization for the 1,000th time today, unable to deviate into something more helpful. Gone, gone, gone. He was never going to see her again. He was never going to talk to her again. He couldn't even look back on the good memories and smile because the crime that she had committed made it impossible to see her in a positive light ever again. The mutilated face of that poor boy followed him everywhere that he went now. Sunken within that black box, connected to wires and cords and tubes, the toothless mouth gaping open, the black sockets, maggots, flies, green, brown, white, orange, red. The smell, he had never smelled anything like that before. Rotten human meat, like pork that had been baking outside for days on end, mixed with sickly sweetness like moldy peaches that had gone bad far too many days ago. Impossible nausea gripped him, his sobs growing louder and louder. Why would she do that? Why would she do that? Why would she ever do that? His nerves were so shot from the image, he couldn't think of anything else. Why? Why would she do that? Why would his baby ever do that? Why couldn't he stop her? Why didn't he see it coming? Wouldn't there have been signs? If he had paid attention, would he have picked up on something? Sure, the month leading up to the 28th, the daycare had been closed, but before that, surely a crime like this would have been planned before those 29 days. Could he have done something to stop her before she ended an innocent child's life? Or had there been some other way to stop it from happening? To stop her from turning down the path that led her there in the first place? Could it have been the way that he raised her? Since he was essentially a stand-in dad for her while her father took care of the company, he had been sure to teach himself how important it was to be a good parent. He had been careful. He had never hit her, he had never snapped or yelled at her, he comforted her when she cried and played with her when she was bored, but he didn't give her everything that she wanted either. He stood his ground when he had to tell her no, he punished her with time out when she was being especially naughty, and made sure to regulate how much special treatment he gave her compared to the other kids. Hadn't that been good enough? He had thought that it had been good enough before all of this. He thought that he had raised a well-rounded adult, an adult who had a stable job at a place that she loved. The only issues seemed to be that she didn't have any friends beyond the animatronics, but it's not like that was a sign that someone would become a murderer. So what did he do wrong? Moon's nightcap began to wrap around his head, the dark star-speckled fabric completely covering his face. His nightcap was almost the entire length of his body, prehensile in nature due to its purpose, to help him keep balance while moving so he doesn't wake the children. But now it was squeezing his head like a boa constrictor, muffling his piercing wail as he broke down even further. He had done this entire routine over and over countless times already. He would cry and cry and cry until he had exhausted himself, then go completely numb and just stare on into nothing, so disconnected from his body he couldn't feel anything at all. He wanted to go back to that state, to just lie there in a stupor for a few hours, waiting for his out-of-control emotions to build up to the point of overwhelming him again and leading back into frenzies like this. Did he not pay attention to her enough? Did he not make her feel loved? Did he not care for her needs? Was he horrible at raising kids and just hadn't noticed until now? What if he was still making those same mistakes with the other kids in his daycare? What if he was just raising psychopaths and didn't even know it? What if the first generation of daycare kids, the ones that were all adults now, what if they were all going to become child killers? What if Vanny was just the first of an entire generation of murderers? Childcare was his entire purpose, the whole reason he'd been invented in the first place. And if he couldn't even do that right, why was he still here? The scrap dump called for him again, the suffocation of his nightcap's coils making him dizzy. The best thing for the children would be for him to leave and never come back. At least then he wouldn't keep messing them up. Stupid, why did he have to be so stupid? If it wasn't for him, none of this would have happened. If he was just better at raising her, if he just paid attention, if he had stopped her before she got to James, if he had just fought harder, if he had just grabbed her with his good arm. She would still be here. All his fault. It was all his fault. The unbearable pain of that conclusion continued to burn through every artificial nerve in his body, like he had swallowed a lit match after filling himself to the brim with kerosene. He was pathetic, dangerous and useless and completely, utterly pathetic. He didn't deserve to even be breathing after how much he failed James. He wanted to go to her. The coils of his nightcap loosened all at once, falling limp over his shoulders as he tilted forwards, staring down at the hard concrete so far below. Was it high enough? The top of the staircase was over 100 feet in the air. So maybe. He had questioned that exact thing at least 5 times before this. The only reason he hadn't already gone and done it was Sun. Due to their shared body, if Moon jumped, he would be dragging Sun down with him. His brother was asleep right now, but of course he wasn't any more at rest than Moon was at the moment. On Sun's side of their mind, there was a backdrop of distorted, blurry images that were close enough to reality to be recognized, but just uncanny enough to unsettle any outsiders looking in. The nightmare. The same one that Moon had been getting for the past however long it had been since the 28th. It didn't have a script, but it did have a general theme, one that was probably easy to guess. Vanny. It was just the sight of Vanny's broken body on the pavement, the feeling of her bones crunching beneath his hands as he tried to resuscitate her, tricked into thinking that there was still a way to bring her back somehow. Sometimes the scene was made even worse with him trying to resuscitate her as a child, the same exact ghastly injuries imprinted all over her little body while she cried and begged for him to make the pain stop. Sometimes James was there, standing silently with his head slightly tilted, mouth still dropped open in his final scream, his throat leading so far into darkness that it was impossible to see anything but the glistening bodies of the maggots holding him together. Those nightmares, those were the simpler ones. They were the best that it got. Sun and Moon had already made an agreement about all of this, just to keep themselves sane. Moon would stay awake while Sun slept, and Sun would stay awake while Moon slept. They would watch each other's nightmares from the outside, and if it stayed simple, they would let the other keep sleeping. Only when they got bad did they wake the other up to stop it. The nightmare had stayed mostly the same since Moon had last checked. Little Vanny, at the age of maybe 5 or below, was lying on the daycare's padded flooring, her body so mangled she could hardly be recognized. The revoltingly graphic image made him feel sick, but the only way to understand how tormented the brothers were during sleep was to hear a first-hand description of what it looked like. Her legs were broken in so many places they looked more like a carrot that had been cut up on a chopping board, both feet facing the wrong way with her shin bones sticking out of her heels. Her spine was folded in half, the back of her head nearly touching what remained of her calves, piles of pink intestines, a purple liver, and shattered bits of what used to be a rib cage, splattering outwards from her popped belly like a poorly cracked egg. The lacerations on her face were the worst for him, because out of all of her injuries, those were the most intentional. A row of molars visible through a slashed cheek, her scalp peeling away. So much red. Sonny, help me! It hurts! Vanny was howling. Please, get me out of here! I'm here! You're going to be okay! Sonny stammered from within the dream. Just please keep breathing, stay awake! Help! Sun turned away from her, shouting into the foggy darkness. Help! Someone please help! His sleeves were stained a brilliant scarlet, his hands trying to stop the bleeding. Her neck bones were sticking out of the front of her throat, the white and red mixing in a column of jagged bone. But somehow she was still speaking, still pleading with him. It hurts. It hurts. Please, Sonny, make it stop. It hurts. Moon covered his mouth, trembling and feeling the lights of his eyes flickering. The desperation, the panic, all of it was so raw and real for Sun, and it didn't matter that Moon knew that it was just a dream. He hated just sitting there and watching, but he had to let Sunny get some rest. It hadn't gotten bad enough to intervene yet. I'm so sorry. Moon's crackled voice echoed through the chamber. I'm so sorry, Sonny. He wanted to throw himself over the edge again. The yearning of the scrap dump had attached itself to his neck, trying to drag him downwards to its depths. It would be quick, so quick. He probably wouldn't feel it at all. And then all of this would be over. He wouldn't have to cry anymore. He wouldn't have to lie there and feel empty anymore. He wouldn't have to fall asleep and face nightmares anymore. He wouldn't have to worry about hurting the kids anymore. It would all just be gone. And it didn't really matter what happened after death, because it couldn't be worse than this. Still, Moon had to firmly lean back from the pull of gravity, digging his fingertips into the metal platform beneath him and tucking his legs up to his chest. Think of Sun. Sun would go down with him, and he couldn't make that decision for him. It wouldn't be fair. There was a tilt on Sun's side of their mindscape, the balance tipping. His nightmare was changing. The scene of Vanny's young, bloodied face warped into a kaleidoscope of colors that belonged in an acid trip. Red and white and yellow and green. The sound of crying infants, panting, heaving breaths like that from a monster. The scratch of claws against splintering wood. Buck teeth snapping inside of a fleshy red maw. It was coming. The rabbit was coming. He had to get him out of there before... Wake up, wake up, wake up! Moon was hollering in the real world now, smacking the side of his head as he tried to jostle his brother. Son, wake up, it's not real! When Moon finally managed to rip him out of the clutches of the nightmare, Sun awoke screaming. Hey, it's okay, you're okay, Sonny. It wasn't real. Moon was trying to comfort his brother, hugging himself and pacing in circles. Sun was an absolute wreck, his presence spazzing in place like an unstable star, sparking with flares of red and green and sickly white. Keeping himself from getting dragged down into it was like trying to resist the field of a magnet, but Moon tried his best anyway, hating to hear what Sun sounded like when he cried. Thank you, Sun said once he was coherent again. I'm sorry, Moon mumbled. I tried to get you out faster, but that one was really difficult. It's okay, I'm fine, Sun insisted. You did it, you got me out, it's over, I'm fine. He seemed to be trying to make a recovery as quick as possible, retracting all of the spiking emotion back into himself and trying to convert it all back into the buttercup yellows he usually emitted. Despite his best efforts, it still wasn't quite working. The yellow had a sort of olive tint to it, like the curling edges of a dying petal, shimmering from behind a thin veil that he had thrown up to try and block Moon from seeing what was going on. The guilt sank its fangs even deeper into him. If only he had been a better caretaker, if only he had stopped her before it even happened, if only he had pulled her up, Sun wouldn't be... Do you want to have a turn? Sun asked. Did you get enough sleep? Moon said. I can keep watching if you want to try and get a little more. No, I'm fine, Sun said in a rush. I want to go clean up the daycare now. Clean up? Oh no. Moon didn't really want to give in, but he knew better than to try and convince Sun to do anything else with his free time. Distant scraping noises floated up from the drop into the dump, making them pause. Moon stood there for several long moments, the void of darkness conjuring up a yearning that began to really, really scare him. Moon? Moon stepped away from the edge. Yeah, I'm going. Even though it felt like he was fighting his way out of a magnetic field, Moon turned around and passed through the rickety wooden door, shutting it tightly behind him as he began his trek through the storage room. His night vision guided him past the racks of cardboard boxes and dusty bowling pins. The aisles that had been toppled during the struggle with Bonnie were still lying there, their contents scattered in all directions. He found himself stepping over broken registers, stacks of printer paper, and forgotten tools. The rats and cockroaches ignored him, a mouse or two even having the gall to crawl over his foot as he stopped to find a path around a particularly messy pile of boxes. Moon was quickly growing frustrated with all of this. Not really because of the mess, but because he was so lightheaded he kept tripping over everything. Just when he almost made it to the exit, the corner of his vision lit up with red, giving him a warning. He was on 12% power. He couldn't remember the last time he had charged, and honestly, he didn't care. It's not like he had done anything recently to deserve a full battery. When he stopped in front of the safe-like door of the storage room, he was able to open it easily without the use of a key. He had bashed the lock apart a while ago, and so far, nobody seemed to notice or care. He stepped out into the lobby, making his way towards their part of the pizzaplex, his head stuffed full of cotton. Once he made it through the golden double doors of the daycare, Moon was able to remotely turn the lights on and finally surrender control to Sun. From the very moment Sun gained control of their body, every single circuit lit up like he was being motivated by the shock collar all over again. Had to clean up right now. The smell of plastic and cleaning chemicals rushed into his tanks as he took his first few breaths, his face squished into the floor and his limbs splayed out in different directions. He pushed himself back upright and set his sights on his daycare. It was all so empty. So empty. The jungle gyms and swirly slides and monkey bars were abandoned, the play place hollow and quiet, every colorful plastic surface frozen in time like it had been put in cryostasis. No playing children, no smiles or laughter, just the smell of bleach and hand sanitizer. Moon had dropped Sun off at the top of the stairs, so Sun made use of the rails on either side of him, pulling himself up and waiting for the dizziness to subside. His low battery sent an achy pang up his body, with 12% flashing over his vision again, as if his drained system was hoping that he would be more reasonable than his twin. But he didn't have time. The rabbit had gotten so close to him, he swore that he had been able to feel the specks of spittle on his face, detect the smell of a wet penny from its gaping maw. Gone. She was really gone. It's all my fault. Sun struck himself in the face hard enough that he nearly knocked himself out. He rubbed at the dented spot, whispering to himself, No. Stop thinking about that. Stop. He had to clean up right now. He kicked himself into motion, putting on a burst of breakneck speed as he dove down the stairs. The sounds of his clanking footsteps echoed too far against the vast walls of the empty daycare, the silence trying to consume him. Stop thinking about her. Stop. He only quit running when he had to use the ceiling cord to make it up to his room, his hands quivering feverishly as he dug through the drawers, hunting for his cleaning supplies. He knocked several empty plastic containers out of the way, finally finding a full bottle of disinfectant near the back. He stuffed 3 rolls of paper towels under his arm, kicking the drawer closed, about to leap down to the ground floor to get started. But something had caught his eye. The drawer with the tape holding it closed. She had been so little, so playful and innocent. What had happened? What went wrong? Was it me? No! He smacked himself in the head again, this time with the bottle, and forced himself to back off and get to work. The play place was always the most difficult, so he liked to start with that so the job would get easier as he went along. He began to spray and wipe a support beam, letting the repetitive cycle draw him in. He just had to focus on cleaning, just cleaning, nothing else. He scrubbed across flat surfaces, getting down on his knees and working into the grooves of the floor mats as they made progress through the first level of the play place. Just spray and wipe over and over and over and over, clean up, clean up, clean up, clean up, clean up, clean up, clean up. Cleaning up always gave him a mixture of relief and anxiety. He relished the rhythmic movements, the way grime washed away, feeling like he was fixing up every little problem in his life. He was being productive. Look how good he was being. Maybe he would deserve a little charge after this. But for some reason, it was never enough. He couldn't just be satisfied. He had to complete all of it. Now. Or else. The or else part was very vague to him, but he was pretty sure that it would mean nothing but bad, horrible, avoidable things that he never ever wanted to look in the eye. Or else terror, or else pain, or else torturous, relentless panic. He was never gonna see her again. What was the last conversation they had? He couldn't even remember. And now it was gone. It was gone. He missed her. He missed her so much. Why did she do this? Didn't she know how loved she was? A strike to the face startled him out of it. Stop thinking about her. Stop thinking about her. Stop. Just keep cleaning, keep cleaning, keep cleaning. Sun quickened his pace, leaning into the scrubbing he was doing on a ladder, digging his throbbing fingers into the plasticky surface until it bent. He made progress across every square inch of the play place, inside and out. Every foam-padded floor, wall, obstacle, and ceiling was sprayed and scrubbed until his weak arm hurt. The world began to slop together, like sticky, unwrapped candies being melted and stirred all into one unappetizing mess. He was being chased. He was so sure of it. He was only just barely keeping away from certain peril. He had to. Obstacles, rubber beams, tunnels, circular peepholes. Keep going, go up and up and up, stop thinking. Level 3, level 4. He scrubbed at a particularly narrow crevice, on his hands and knees, standing up again to go over the ceiling's foam-encased supports. He didn't feel better as his job went on. In fact, the urgency was only growing worse, something closer to life or death. He had to. It would be okay. He would be normal again soon. Go up, keep going, hurry, scrub. What did he do wrong? Why did she turn out this way? How could he have let this happen? No, keep cleaning. His back was pressed against the roof of a plasticky tunnel. The light from outside filtered into a scarlet haze. He was digging his fingertips into the connection points between each part of the plastic tunnel, trying to beat back the germs that were crowding in on him. What if there were warning signs? What if he could have stopped it? What if he could have saved Scrubbing. He sprayed even more disinfectant into the groove, filling it like a river, and he just kept scratching at it, the red paint peeling off. Why couldn't he do anything right? Why was he always such a screw-up? If he had just raised her better, none of this would have happened. He scratched all the way through the folds of the soggy paper in his hands, digging his fingers into the crevice, scratching harder and harder. He could not stop. Clean up. If he didn't get it right with her, he wouldn't get it right for any of the other kids after her. He was just going to keep on making everything worse and worse, like the stupid, useless waste of space he was, fumbling around like some big dumb idiot that destroyed everything in his path. He knew it, the band knew it, the kids knew it, everyone knew it. This daycare would be better off if he were dead. In one jarring pop, the cycle was broken. Sun caterwauled in pain, releasing the paper towels and snatching his right hand up against his chest, holding it there and curling over it protectively. His labored breathing crowded in on him, compressed by the red tunnel, the sting of chemicals slicing through his nostrils like dirty needles. Pain. For a few seconds he couldn't figure out what happened. But when he finally worked up the courage to remove his hand from his chest so he could see what was going on, he gasped in shock. The tips of his pointer finger, middle finger, and ring finger had all snapped off, leaving the endoskeleton visible. What? Moon's alarm punched through their system. He was waking up, probably because of how abrasive Sun's mind must feel against his. It's okay, go back to sleep. Sun bit down hard on his lip to keep from crying from the pain, flapping his right hand around as he tried to adjust to the damage while continuing to hush and rub at his brother's mindscape. It's all right. Just relax. It's okay. Just go back to sleep. He managed to ease Moon down until he settled once again, falling back under, none the wiser. Sun couldn't stop staring at his fingers, the sight of his endoskeleton peeking out, making him feel ill. Just the shell had been taken off, like the cap of an expo marker, but it was stinging like fire and making it incredibly hard to keep still. His gears churned as he caught sight of his fingertips scattered all over the play place's obstacles, but he picked them up anyway, putting each of them back on as if hoping that they would just pop back into place. Unfortunately, when he shook his hand to test it out, the tiny dome-like shells popped off again, leaving him staring hopelessly into space. Maybe he could keep going and just use his left hand instead? But what if he just broke those fingers too? If all of his fingers were broken, he couldn't clean, and if he couldn't clean... No. It was coming back. He wanted to go to her. He wanted to be with her. He deserved to be... No! I'll fix it! Sun stammered frantically to himself, gathering up his cleaning supplies and picking up each of his fingertips. I'll fix it, and then get right back to this, I promise. He held on tight to the wall and got back to his feet, staggering his way out of the play place and back down to the floor. Once he had gotten there, he tried to hurry up to his room, everything working against him the entire time. His body was sore and slow, warning him that it would give out soon, but the urge to clean up kept bringing him to a twitchy halt. His broken fingers tried to reach back towards the dirty surfaces, the needling anxieties worsening. Every step that he took away from his job only increased the awful, painful pressure. It wasn't done yet. He had to finish it now. It was all uneven. He messed up the pattern. But he couldn't clean with messed up fingers, and he may have the tools to fix himself up in his room. Sun called for the ceiling cord, finally making it up to his room and heaving himself up over the edge, arms shaking. He lied there for a little on the floor, his non-existent stomach churning. This sudden bout of weakness was completely unexpected to him, keeping him on the ground for a while as he waited for the world to stop spinning. He hurt all over, especially deep inside of him where his battery was kept. He checked his battery percentage, noting that he was only at 4%. He couldn't quite explain it, but for some reason, he just didn't care about that. He kind of wanted the pain. Once he could, Sun leveraged himself into a seated position, still keeping a hand on the wall as he crawled towards his drawers full of supplies. He scanned over an assortment of tiny screws and joints, comparing each one to the broken fingers, trying to find matches. It looked like he would need to remove the broken screws and bolts in order to replace them with fresh ones if he ever wanted to use those fingers again. He was not going to like this next part. Sun took the tools that he needed and picked out a small screwdriver, placing his hand flat on top of the desk and preparing himself. Since he obviously couldn't paralyze and numb himself, he was going to feel every second of this. After quickly checking to make sure Moon's nightmare was only at the first stage, Sun began the process of picking the broken parts out. The pain intensified as he poked around his injury, his wrist tightening in the urge to pull away and hide from the intrusive prodding. A sharp pop announced the first screw coming loose, and he bit onto his pursed lips to keep quiet. He just had to do it fast. Nothing to it, really. As he worked, his rays began to pull back into his head like flowers retreating from the night's darkness. His foot tapped feverishly against the floor, the tiny bell of the jester-like shoe ringing through his mind. He had to keep cleaning. He had to hurry up already. All of those germs are regrouping and reforming their alliances. He had to keep scrubbing, keep wiping, keep cleaning. Moon's hands were drenched with red. He was pressing his entire weight on Vanny's spurting throat, and yet she was still somehow pleading with him. Help! Help, please! It hurts so bad! Please don't leave me! Sun let out a small grunt as his fingers slipped, wrenching the half-protruding screw to the left, sending up another crack of pain through his knuckles. Come on, focus! He had to keep away from Moon's nightmare, but it was like trying to ignore a TV at full volume set on the other side of the room. Her tiny voice, crying and begging to be saved, filled with so much fear and agony he could practically feel it in himself. He wanted to go to her. The urge was strong, so strong it felt like an iron cable tied around his heart, pulling him towards the platform with the broken railing. Why was he even still here? Everyone knew that it was his fault. Everyone knew that, if he had just done better, James would have never suffered the death that he had suffered. It was all his fault. All his fault, all his fault, all your fault, all your fault. Your fault, your fault, your fault. He should jump. He should really jump this time. The kids would be better off without him. No, don't think that! His foot tapped faster, the bell ringing louder. He just had to fix his fingers and get back to work. Sun finally managed to put the new screws back in, taking the shell of his fingertip and reattaching it. It was numb and tingly, but as he shook it out, the feeling slowly returned. Okay, on to the next. Just as Sun began to assess the damage of the next finger, his vision slid and slipped, doubling until it looked like he had 10 fingers on each hand. He shook himself, blinking his sticky lids open and closed, but still couldn't get the blurriness to subside. The red flashing in the corner of his vision returned, along with an ache in his battery that rippled up and down his body in waves, like the rumbling aftershocks of an earthquake. He was on 2% charge, and it was really starting to get to him. His movements were sluggish and off-kilter as he continued to try and fix his fingers, continuously missing the screws and struggling to fit them in the right place. Tremors began to travel down his arms, making it impossible to line up the right parts. He huffed in frustration, knowing exactly what all of this meant. He would have to wait even longer to continue cleaning up. He tried to go faster, his thoughts beginning to squish and slosh around like suds in a soapy mop bucket, rocking back and forth, the ringing of the bells traveling from one ear to another. He squeezed his eyes and blinked rapidly, trying and failing to dispel the droopiness in his head. Awake. He had to stay awake. He couldn't leave his fingers unfixed. It would be uneven. He just had one more finger to fix, and then he would go charge. At this point, it was a personal challenge to see if he could take it. But did he really want to charge? The hollow weakness inside of him kind of felt good. He wanted to lean into it. He wanted it to pin him down, to punish him for what he had done. He deserved it, after all. 1%. The beeping alarm was still going on, though it might just be the bells. Moon's nightmare kept leaking into him. He could feel the warm liquid sticking to his palms, the texture of her matted hair, the whimpers in her fading voice. Sun deserved to die like that. The kids would be better off without him. And he missed her so much. He missed her little voice. He missed her squealing laughter. He missed her sparkling eyes and silly games and crayon drawings covered in purple glitter glue. He just wanted to hold her again. That would be enough for him. Done. The final fingertip clicked back into place, and he dropped the screwdriver, the clatter of that seeming to echo around his head. He opened and closed his fist, then began to wave his hand back and forth in front of his face, watching the odd, ghostly doubles it left behind. He laughed a little, thinking it looked funny. Wait, was he supposed to be doing something else? It was getting really hard to think. The alarm, beeping alarm, charge, right, charging cable. Had to charge before getting back to work. He had to charge. Sun pushed off from the table, trying to extend his legs so he could walk over to his bed. Instead, he reached 0% and collapsed in the darkness. Black. Nothing but black for who knows how long. Then, flashing red text. 0% battery. Activating reserve power. Caution, reserve power at 49%. Refill reserve soon. Restarting. Part by part, feeling returned to Sun. It started inside of his inner mechanisms, then trickled through his arms, down his legs, up into his face and rays. His eyes fluttered open, and he was met with the lopsided view of his room, the gifts of the children staring down at him incredulously. He groaned at the sour feeling in his chest. It never felt good to run off of reserve power. He had been completely dunked in a vat of drowsiness, his entire body feeling 3 times heavier than it had been before. Just moving his arm to rub his throbbing temples was a struggle. Sun had fallen on his right side, legs sticking out awkwardly in a half-bent position with his right arm squished beneath him. As he tried to squirm around and push himself up, the ground seemed to actively try and pull him back down, the incredible weight of his metal body being shown to him clear as day. Elbows shaking, Sun managed to sit himself up, setting his sights on the charging station across the room. He was pretty sure that he couldn't stand up, so Sun just opted to crawl towards the station, feeling a bit ridiculous but also being too tired to care. His inner workings were absolutely screaming at him to charge, and he could no longer fight his instincts. He slumped against the wall, feet tangled up in his bed sheets as he pulled at the charging station, the act of holding his arms above his head nearly impossible. When he finally grabbed onto his charging cable, he let his arms drop, taking a few moments to let his aching pistons rest. He had to lift his hands again to open up the port at the back of his head, glaring at the mess of blankets around him as he felt around for the right spot. Finally, he managed to plug himself in. He fell onto the bedding with an exhausted sigh, almost passing out again just from the effort of all of that. The charging station didn't fill up his reserve power. They had to go to parts and services and ask the technicians to refill reserve power. So instead, he watched as his normal battery percentage began to rise. 1%, 2%, 3%. The sourness faded as his systems switched to running off of what the wall was giving him. Once he was strong enough to lift his head and move around again, he knew that he had only just gotten through the easy part. Now he had to lie here and do absolutely nothing. Sun initially occupied himself with getting into a more comfortable position. He settled on his left side, setting up a complicated arrangement of pillows around his head. Sun and Moon's head was oddly shaped. It was more of a disc than anything, perfectly circular like a paper plate to portray the celestial bodies that they were named after. So, in order to lie down comfortably while charging, he had to squish multiple pillows around the rim of his face so he could lie at a diagonal angle, making room for the cord protruding out the back. Once he was through that process, he tried to just relax into the nest of blankets around him. His foot continued to twitch back and forth with a mind of its own, discomforts sprouting up all over his body and forcing him to change positions again and again and again, always seeming to find a new reason that this spot wasn't it after every new combination. But why should he be charging? There was a cold pinch at the back of his head, like that thought had been injected into him via a needle. I mean, really, why should he? He hasn't done anything to deserve it. He deserved to waste away and watch his reserve power run all the way to 0. No! Sun had bolted upright so fast the cord was nearly yanked out. Breathing hard, he picked and pulled at his ragged rays, trying to get a hold of himself. He wasn't supposed to think like that. It wasn't like him. He was being bad. He was horrible. He was a horrible daycare attendant. He wanted to... Sun lurched to his feet, but forgot that he was still plugged in. The cord ripped violently out of his head, and he toppled over, his vision darkening for a moment. But he had to clean. He had to clean. He had to stop thinking. He had to. If he didn't, he would... Son made a sound between a laugh and a whimper, falling back against the wall and plugging the charging cable back in. It was only at 4%, but he couldn't stop thinking about the unclean tower that loomed outside. It didn't matter if he cleaned it all yesterday. It was dirty again. Dirty and grimy and nothing, absolutely nothing filling it. His body wanted to lie down, but he couldn't. He couldn't just lie down again. He had to move. He had to stop this horrible, torturous silence. Son's hands tapped in a frenzy along his knees, both of his feet twitching in time as he swayed from side to side, trying to bat away the restlessness inside of him. Was he going to feel like this forever? Was every single day going to be exactly like this, just a constant cycle of nightmares and cleaning and nightmares and cleaning and nightmares and cleaning? He couldn't keep doing this for much longer. He missed their little voices so much. He wanted to see them again, to laugh and play games, to do arts and crafts, to put on puppet shows. He even wanted to deal with the less fun things, like telling her, no, you can't have an extra cookie, or no, you can't tease your big brother even if the other kids are, or no, you can't stay here with me, you have to go home with your father. He could feel himself beginning to crack apart with each expired memory, tiny fissures digging deeper and deeper into him, agonizingly slow. Help! Help! Fanny screamed in Moon's nightmare. Please, please, just get me out! It hurts! His fingers slinked around a fistful of his withering rays and began to squeeze. He was immediately shot with a headache, but he didn't care. He pulled and he pulled, just trying to distract himself from the anguish building inside of him. He was never going to see her again. He had gone over that thought 100 times by now, but it still hadn't lost its devastating blow. Never coming back. Gone. Lost. What did he do wrong? What did he do wrong? He yanked harder. Something popped. He didn't care. That poor kid. Why would she ever do that to James? Why didn't he know? Why didn't he raise her better? Why didn't he stop her? Help! Help! It hurts, Moon! Fanny howled. Please, please! I'm sorry! Please, just help me! Son wrenched on his rays again, the pain deafening him just long enough to block out her pleas for mercy. Stupid, stupid, stupid. He was so stupid. He shouldn't be allowed around kids. He was broken. He was useless. He was downright dangerous to them. Why else would Fanny have turned out the way that she did? Son was being absolutely crushed beneath the torrent of dark thoughts, but he couldn't find any reason to resist them. He was a disgrace, a complete and utter failure. If Victor knew what he had done, he would dismantle him on the spot. Then jump. Something nasty inside of him hissed. Stop crying about it and jump. It'll be quick, so quick you won't even feel it. All of this will go away. Son tilted his head upwards at the exit of the room, the one that led to the platform that oversaw the entire daycare. Jess's gift was still taped just above the entryway, the sparkle of the glitter reaching him even all the way over here. We love you, Sonny. Son began to cry. He wasn't really used to crying. He wasn't supposed to cry. His design was not built for it. The entire purpose of his character was to be sunny and happy, to always have a bright 1,000-watt smile and light up the children's day every time they chose to drop by. He was not supposed to cry. Absolutely not. Son pulled on his rays even harder, white-hot pain stabbing through his head. He had to stop crying, he had to stop crying, he had to stop crying. Something popped again, louder this time. Something else cracked. Not supposed to cry, not supposed to... And then a clenched fist was thrown out to the side as one of his rays were ripped clean off of his scalp. The pain was like a bomb going off in his ear canal, blasting everything with dazzling agony. It continued to yank at him relentlessly, so mind-numbing it was hard to even feel what the rest of his body was doing in response. What happened? Why did you scream? Moon, of course, had been startled awake by all of this. Son? What? Sun gasped for air, hunched over on all fours, with his fists balled up in the blankets, shaking uncontrollably. There, lying on the ground in front of him, was his ray. Red and green wires stuck out of the little orange triangle, the shaft of the endoskeleton jutting out like a broken bone. Sun could distinctly feel the opposite ends of those snapped wires flapping against his right cheek, his other rays spasming and pulling in tight from the continuous shock waves of pain running through his artificial nerves. He had not expected it to hurt this much, but for some reason, he didn't regret it. The moment Sun and Moon's mindscapes realigned, they didn't have to say anything to each other at all. The depth of the twins' grief, it was wrapping around them like strangling barbed wire, pulling them further down, 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 engulfing them completely in never-ending anguish, so excruciating they could not take it anymore. Here, they realized that they had both come to the same conclusion. There was no other way out. I won't unless you agree, Moon told him, not needing to add any more context. Do you want to go together? In response, Sun unplugged from the wall and stepped out onto the platform of their golden tower, calling the ceiling cord to take them down to the ground level. He didn't immediately go for the exit, instead turning to the art room. He fished out a small handheld notebook and a Sharpie, scribbling something down and then tearing that piece of paper out, reading it over. It was a very simple message, only 7 words. Tell the kids it was an accident. A funny feeling flickered inside of him, like a new flame being coaxed into life. He didn't really have a name for it. It was an odd lightness that filled up the empty space inside of him, his surroundings seeming to fade as Sun became more aware of something that he had always assumed was very far away. It wasn't exactly happiness. It was some sick mockery of happiness. But at this point, Sun didn't really care. It was better than what he had been feeling alone in his room. Sun folded up the note and kept it in one fist, letting the ceiling cord swing him up to the top of the stairs. He only hesitated once when he put his hands on the swirling handles of the golden double doors that would lead him out of the daycare. He looked back, his eyes tracing over the playground, the ball pit, the toy boxes and beanbags and fake cotton candy clouds painted over the light blue walls. I'm so sorry, little ones, but I have to go, he said to nobody. The door opened. The arcade, the attraction immediately outside of the daycare's pickup spot, was lit by the newly rising sun, giving everything scarlet and crimson shades that made it look like the whole place was drenched in blood. Slanted beams of light shone through the main entrance, sparkling off the shiny metallic surfaces of each individual game, their shadows melding together in deep maroon hues. It was almost as empty as the daycare had been. Sun's inner mechanisms skipped a beat when he saw the looming figure of DJ crouched just outside of the arcade. From a quick glance, it appeared that he was waiting for the new managers to arrive, lying down with the majority of his body in the lobby and his head wedged as close as he could get to the main entrance without breaking the arcade games. After the introduction of the managers yesterday, of course DJ would want to welcome them back when they started their first proper day on the job. Sun immediately darted back out of sight when he made eye contact with him. Sun hid the note inside of his stomach hatch, then blew out a shaky breath, prodding at his face as he manually stretched it into a smile. Had to act normal. Had to act fine. Nothing was wrong. Nothing at all. Once he had his excuse ready, He stepped back out into DJ's line of sight, praying that he wouldn't ask why he had jumped like that. The big machine gave him a friendly wave, but there were so many arcade machines between him and Sun that no fluent ASL could be exchanged between them. Sun stuck to the side of the arcade, passing by the attraction in order to make it to the lobby. He consciously tracked each and every little movement that he made, trying to look natural. Just smile, relax. It doesn't matter if you do something embarrassing. None of this is going to matter in a few minutes. Good morning, DJ greeted once he was close enough. Are you here to... His gloved hands froze mid-air, taking in Sun's appearance. Sun stopped, becoming even more aware of his missing ray. He made a feeble attempt to cover it up by placing a hand over the injury. DJ asked him, "What happened to your rays?" There wasn't really a word in sign language for that part of Sun's body, so he just ended up combining the words sunbeam and hair. Sun considered playing dumb and acting like he didn't understand what he was talking about, but that was stretching it a bit far. Huh? Oh, yeah, that. Sun stayed casual, making sure his smile didn't falter. It just fell out while I was asleep. The kids tug on my rays all the time. I guess that wore this one down enough to make it break. DJ's brow stayed crooked, his skepticism clear. Sun held his expression, then reflected back a confused look at him in the hopes that DJ would think that he was the one being weird. Have you been doing okay? DJ asked him next. I've been better, but it's nothing that I can't handle. Sun rolled off to him, the cheeriness coming so naturally it was almost creepy to him. I'm really hoping that our new managers are going to be able to help us out. I'm ready to get rid of all this muck in my head. There was a long space between the end of Sun's sentence and DJ's response. Okay, well, do you want to sit here and wait for them with me? DJ offered. No thank you, Sun brushed that off, signing. I figured that I should wait in the auditorium until a technician can open up parts and services for me. If the mall is opening today, I probably only have a few minutes to get there without a bunch of customers swarming me and asking me questions. He offered a giggle at the end, but it was so empty that he was glad DJ couldn't properly hear it. Again, DJ just narrowed his eyes at him, his hands still elevated like he wanted to say something else. Sun just continued to smile, counting down the seconds until he would be free, knowing that social norms wouldn't let this bland conversation go on forever. Okay then, I'll tell them you're waiting, DJ eventually signed. Okay, sounds good, Sun signed, already backing away. All at once, Sun was hit with the realization that this would be his last conversation with DJ. So, before he turned, he added quickly, goodbye, DJ. Thanks for everything. Sun spun back around to face forward, trying to keep his stride unbothered and smooth across the tiles of the main lobby. He could feel DJ's eyes on him as clearly as he would feel a kid hanging off of his back, but all that he could do about it was try not to act suspicious and just keep walking until he got out of sight. He slipped through the halls on either side of Monty's attraction, escaping DJ's line of sight. As he passed a few trash cans and restrooms, Sun pulled the note back out of his stomach hatch, returning it to his closed fist. When he reached the end of the hall, he stopped. The rest of the mall stretched out in front of him, washed out in the same red glow as everything else. Logos of different brands lined every surface, the neon lights not yet lit, the security cage around each counter not yet lifted. Staff bots were finishing up their nightly routine, and even a few human employees were beginning to trickle in, messing with their keys as they began to open up the stores for business. Blocking all of that from him was a gate. It was a new but temporary addition to the Pizzaplex, made of several metal bars all crisscrossing each other, meant to keep nosy visitors from sneaking inside and bothering the animatronics while they recovered. It might have been an impassable barrier for humans, but Sun was easily able to scale it, so used to maneuvers like this that it barely took more than a thought to drop down on the other side and step out into the red light. He locked the smile onto his face and picked up the pace. That same funny feeling was washing away the conversation with DJ, wrapping him up in something that was almost comforting. It was like something was whispering to both him and Moon, "You're going to be all right. It'll be over soon. All of this pain will be gone in no time, I promise." A weird restlessness was building from deep within his body, making his limbs feel cold and his head feel fuzzy. It was like he could vividly feel every pump and breath and click of the mechanisms that kept him alive. He could technically feel all of that before in the background, but simply being aware that all of those little noises were about to stop made those sensations feel so different. Like his body was just dead weight that he was dragging around, something that was slowing him down, a suit that he absolutely needed to escape as soon as possible. Something similar was happening to the world around him, his perspective shifting entirely as he walked. Each store that he passed felt distant, far away, unimportant, like his environment was something that he was watching in a movie, something that wouldn't really matter once he switched off the remote. "It'll all be over soon," the funny feeling kept reassuring him. "This will all go away, the pain will stop, and you'll finally be allowed to rest." Sun cheerily smiled and waved when human employees took notice of him, trying to keep up the facade that his presence was nothing to be concerned about. He passed up the stairs that led to the auditorium, traveling deeper and deeper into the mall, seeking out the security office. Once it was within his sight, the yearning in his chest cracked his heart apart even further. Her smile, her laughter, the silly little games and presents and good nights and good mornings. He missed her so much, it was excruciating. Soon he would see her again, he told himself. Soon. That thought was making him feel something that he hadn't felt in weeks. Something that he had been chasing for so long, he hardly remembered what it felt like. He was happy enough to smile, really smile. He had done it. He had finally fixed himself. When he passed the busted lock and felt the musty air of the storage rooms sweep over him, Sun gladly laid down and let Moon take over. Moon opened his eyes in the darkness, waiting anxiously as his pupils dilated, the forms of metal racks and scattered artifacts fading in. Almost there, almost over. Moon rose, the note still clutched tightly in his hand as he picked his way over piles of boxes and rusted tools, ignoring the rats and cockroaches that infested his surroundings. In fact, he barely saw, heard, or even felt any of it. He could only perceive the longing to get it over with, to cut ties with the entire world and let the universe decide what to do with him. Moon found himself standing at the broken railing, the cold cavern filled with the echoes of his trembling breaths, everything inside of him pounding as he stared down, down, down to the very stretch of cement where she had landed. The toes of his shoes were touching the edge of the platform, hanging off by a mere inch, but he didn't jump just yet. Something, probably his survival instinct, was filling him with anxiety, trying to get him to stop. Was he actually going to do this? He wanted to. He wanted to so much it hurt. But this was terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. He didn't know what would happen, where he would go, if there was even anywhere to go. Too bad, he thought scathingly to himself. You deserve to be terrified. You deserve to regret it on the way down and still end up shattering apart on that pavement. Sonny, are you sure? Moon whispered. I don't want you to go down with me if you really don't want to. Moony, I can't live like this anymore, Sun said, his voice so broken it made Moon want to cry. It's scary, but at least since we're together, we don't have to do this alone. Moon exhaled heavily, his entire life skimming through his head in one unified smudge, every single little memory with Vanny pushing him closer and closer. Okay then, Moon said. He placed the folded note on the ground beside him. The twins were drawn closer and closer to the edge, their need for relief seeming to make the world rotate on an axis, the void creeping closer and closer towards them. Over soon, over soon, over soon. Moon, wait, stop! The voice briefly knocked him out of the trance, and Moon corrected his balance, taking a step back. He knew who the voice was before he even turned around. Through the open wooden door, his new manager was fighting his way through the jungle of cardboard and cobwebs, the cone of his flashlight's beam swinging around with each limping step. The old man was out of breath by the time he stopped behind the doorframe, sweat glistening on his dark forehead, traces of panic stricken all over his face. Moon half expected Murray to shine the light in his face and force the sun out, but he kept the flashlight angled down at the floor, holding up a weathered hand and saying to him, Whoa! Hold on, buddy. Don't do that. Please don't do that. I'm begging you. At any other time, the desperation in his tone would have invoked pity. But Moon just felt so hollow, that emotion no longer had anything to resonate with. Part of him considered just ignoring Murray and doing it anyway. Neither of them did or said anything for what must have been a full minute while Murray looked him up and down, as if trying to figure out what to say. Moon, can you please just wait a few more minutes? I just want to talk to you first. Is it okay if we talk for a bit? It won't take long, I promise. Moon didn't reply at first. He was already quite aware of what Murray was trying to do. It seemed pointless. Look, Moon, I know you and your brother are hurting. You're hurting bad. People don't think of doing this unless if they're hurting. So, what's been going on? You can talk to me about it, buddy. I'll listen. A part of him still wanted to just do it before Murray could get closer. But the bottled-up weight he was carrying was so great, the idea of unloading it sounded blissful and freeing. It wouldn't hurt to tell someone why he was doing it before he went through with it. He might as well, right? To get rid of the other's questions afterwards.
This is all my fault,
Moon said, his voice dry and foreign in his ears.
I failed her. I failed Fanny. Something that I did while raising her. I don't know what it was, but I messed something up, and I know that I'm just gonna hurt them if I stay any longer.
Hurt who?
The other kids,
Moon said lowly.
I raised Fanny wrong. I'm gonna raise them wrong too. What if they grow up to be murderers because of me? What if something like James happens again?
What Vanessa did wasn't your fault, Murray said after a moment's pause. You didn't have control over what she did. Vanessa went down that path because she chose to, not because of how you raised her. Moon snorted. Sensing his disbelief, Murray said, I know it must seem like I'm just making it up to make you feel better, but I swear I'm not. In some cases, yeah, a criminal's actions might be the parents' fault because they neglected them or never told them no or punished them too harshly. But from what I've heard, you did everything right. You were a great dad. She just wasn't a good daughter. In his head, Sun broke down into tears. Flowing waves of emotion crashed up against Moon, making the LED lights in his eyes flicker. He held onto himself, trying to keep his shoulders from jerking in response. I just... Moon shook his head. I can't. It's okay. You can tell me, Murray encouraged. You'll feel better once you get it out. Just tell me whatever's going on in there. I won't judge you. He struggled to form words, the pressure behind his teeth building as his acidic emotions tried to burrow their way out into the world. He wasn't exactly sure why, but he really was compelled to just spill out everything to Murray. Maybe it was a last-ditch effort to relieve the packed-in stress that had swelled in his throat. Maybe it was just how worn out he was from holding it inside for this long. Whatever it was, he soon found the truth coming out, whether he wanted it to or not.
I still can't believe she's gone. I still can't believe this actually happened. It feels so unreal sometimes. I just don't understand how would she do that? Son and I babysat her almost every day. We played with her, we napped with her. She was our best friend. And I know that she did something unforgivable. I saw it for myself. I saw what she did to that poor boy, but I still miss her.
He gave a bitter laugh.
Isn't that horrible? That we still want her back, even after what she did? It's just... I can't live with what I did, with what happened down here. Son and I, we want to go to her. We deserve to go wherever she went.
The void of black seemed to hum a deep, bass-level sound at him, like the gullet of a massive beast opened up beneath them, waiting to claim another soul. No, Moon, you don't deserve to go with her, Murray told him. This isn't going to fix anything. It's just going to make everyone miss you. You need to think of your kids, Moon. Think of how they would feel if they heard that you did this. It would devastate them. My granddaughter, Jess, she absolutely adores you. It would crush her if she heard that you did this to yourself. Do you really want that? Moon didn't respond. He lowered his head back to the dump beneath him, the scrapped staff bots churning eagerly at all the noise that they were making. Please, Moon, just step back from the edge. If not for yourself, for the kids' sake. They need you. They love you. You can't just leave them like this. It hurts, Moon whimpered, squeezing himself tighter as he stared, hypnotized by the void. It hurts so much. I know it hurts, Murray said gently, but I know many, many ways to make it stop hurting, and none of them are anywhere close to something as drastic as this. I understand how you feel.
How could you ever know how this feels?
Moon lashed out, suddenly risen to a roar.
I killed her! I killed my daughter! She landed right down there! I watched her fall and splatter apart right in front of me because I just wasn't good enough! I wasn't good enough at being a father, I wasn't good enough at being the Taker's guardian, and I wasn't a good enough fighter to keep her from dying down here! If I had just been more careful, if I had just done better, she would still be alive! James would still be alive! Gregory would have never gotten wrapped up in all of this! It's all my fault! It's all my fault!
Murray backed up a little, holding both hands out in submission. Moon just scowled at him, shaking weakly from how much that exertion had drained his dying battery. He didn't care that Murray was seeing his eyes flickering so rapidly that they were more black than lit. He wanted him to see. He wanted him to see how hopeless it was and give up on him so he could finally die in peace. I understand how you feel because I lost my daughter too, Murray said. That changed everything. Moon's scowl melted off of his face, his shoulders loosening until they were slopes again. What? Do you remember Chloe? That name sent him spiraling backwards through decades of memories, the old scars burning bright all over again. And then he began to connect the dots. Chloe was Briar's older sister, my first daughter, Murray explained carefully, his head low. She had connections and offered to use those links to get Briar a good job. Chloe and Briar argued a lot about it. You know how siblings are. Chloe thought that Briar would be happier with a higher paying job, but Briar was so determined to do what she loved instead. Briar wanted to work with animals, specifically the ones in SeaWorld. So eventually, after a lot of back and forth, Chloe gave in and got her the position as a performer. And on her first day, there was an accident. Moon flicked back to a more recent memory. The bionic arm. He obviously hadn't asked about it in the short time that they had interacted, and now became morbidly aware of what must have happened. Briar almost died, Murray went on. She lost her arm, she lost her eyes, lost a lot of blood. They told us that she might never wake up, and Chloe couldn't live with the guilt. I found her after she... The hollow ring inside of Moon finally began to respond, waves of sympathy pulsing from him. It nearly tore us apart, Murray kept going, his eyes distant now. The impact of suicide, it's not just the person deciding to end it all, it's the people that they leave behind. Briar lost her best friend. When she woke up, she barely had the motivation to keep trying to get better in the hospital. And I blamed myself. I was going to do exactly what Chloe had done, just to be with my daughter again. But I talked myself down, because I didn't want Briar to also lose her father, too. Murray was now looking directly at him, his hair somehow seeming to have turned grayer since the beginning of the story. I chose to live because the people that I loved still needed me. Please, Moon, your kids love you. Your kids need you. I've heard all sorts of stories from my granddaughter, and in every single one of them, you've been her hero. Your life doesn't have to end here. I'm trained to handle grief like this. I know the path to helping you get better and helping you feel happy again. Wouldn't you rather try that instead? A sharp pain twisted deeper and deeper into his heart at those words, the image of Jess's last present to him appearing at the front of his mind. We love you, Sonny. Moon looked away, picking at the bells around his wrists, his nightcap curling around his upper arm nervously. The noises of the scrap dump floated up behind him, trying to convince him to come back to them, to face them, to listen to them instead. Please, Moon, don't do what Chloe did. It's just going to cause more pain to the ones that you love, Murray said, reaching out to him. Just step away from the edge and let me help you. Please. Everything stood still, his eyes locked on Murray's callus-ridden hand, while his ears could only hear the scrap dump. He's lying. This is the only way out, it seemed to whisper. If you go with him, they'll never let you have this chance again. But Murray was offering a welcoming smile, the worry and stress of the situation still marked into every wrinkle of his leathery features. He cared. Moon could tell. He really did care, and they barely knew each other. Son? Moon prompted his brother. It was clear to both of them what they had decided. Moon stepped away from the edge and into Murray's arms. He cried, hard. Murray held him up, whispering reassurances into his ear. There you go, good job. That's it, just cry it out. You're okay. You'll be okay. Moon did not care that he was being embraced by someone who was essentially a stranger. He was sobbing so hard it was nearly choking him to death, the dizziness of his low battery driving him to his knees. He and Murray stayed on the floor together, the old man rubbing his back and offering comfort to him while Sun and Moon just tried to hold on. I'm sorry. Moon whimpered into his shoulder. No, it's okay, Murray said. Anyone can have moments like this. It's okay if you need help. I'm just glad that we got to you first. DJ was really concerned about you. Oh, thank God those employees saw where you were going. Here, let's get you out of this place. Moon sniffled and nodded at first, but when Murray let go, Moon wobbled and fell, his shins banging harshly against the metal platform. Oh, are you okay? Are you hurt? Murray asked, still holding onto one of his arms. Moon considered making up some sort of excuse, but the flashing red 2% in his vision made it clear that things were not going to turn out well if he didn't get to a charger soon. I haven't charged in a while, Moon admitted, rubbing at his chest where the achiness emitted from. Okay then, that's the first on the list to make you feel better, Murray said, helping him the rest of the way up. Here, we can talk a little more about all of this while you're filling up your battery. Does that sound good? Yeah.
Woo! Okay, sorry, this was a very rough chapter, but nobody died, so that's great. Remember, before you leave, do remember to comment about your favorite part and like the video and all that stuff, so then it can help reach other people. I've worked really, really hard on this, and it only takes a few seconds of your time, and it just makes me really happy because then it can reach other people and stuff. So just remember to do that while you're listening to the rest of this. So, oh yeah, sorry for this episode coming out a week later than it was supposed to. I had like 15 assignments due for college at the same time, and I had to do them over the weekend, and I am not kidding, I had no time to do editing or anything at all. It was literally just assignment after assignment after assignment. I didn't have any time, so unless if something happens like that again, the next chapter should come out in the next 2 weeks, but honestly, I feel like I'm jinxing it, so I'm not gonna promise anything. I will try my best to get it out in the next 2 weeks, so. Oh yeah, and also another thing, there seems to be a misunderstanding about the lore that was in the last chapter, the one about the decapitation thing. Especially the last part, everyone has jumped to a conclusion that I did not foresee, and I want to straighten out things because it's not fun if everyone is really confused about the lore. So I'm not going to tell you guys what I meant, but I'm going to tell you guys to go back and try to examine the timeline and use some, like, what's it called? Not improv. I messed up this word before. What was it? It starts with an I. Infer. So you have to infer a little bit and put some things together, but I'm going to tell you which lores to look back on to try and figure out the timeline thing, so then you guys understand that I didn't mean the thing that everyone immediately jumped to. So, the first, I'm just gonna like list them because there's a lot. So the lores that you should be going back to and paying attention to the dates is Chapter 1's lore, Chapter 14's lore, Chapter 20's lore, Chapter 16's lore, and Chapter 21's lore. What you need to be doing is looking at these dates and then looking how far apart the months were, and then looking at the entries and thinking what may have happened to Victor Miller. I did not intend people to get mixed up, okay? Monty and Victor... Just, I don't want to tell you guys anything, but look back at the date and realize how far away certain events are from each other, and how far away I wanted them to be, so that you guys wouldn't cross them over. But it seems, I know, it's hard to remember dates and stuff, but just look back on the timeline. I should stop talking about that. Sorry, it's just, I don't want everyone to get the wrong idea, and then the general idea in the fandom is gonna be this one thing, when actually it's not true, so. this ending has gone on way too long. So, yeah, we'll get the next episode, hopefully, in the next 2 weeks. Hooray, nobody died here. Sorry if I triggered anyone, but this is a very important topic to talk about. Remember to like the video and comment and stuff so that it gets to further people and so I can be happy and stuff. And that's about it. So, bye. Love you guys. See you next time. Woo!